And we're live. Good afternoon and welcome to the second installment of the JEDO Local Business Recovery Task Force. This point in time, good afternoon and welcome to the second. Thank you for the echo.
Yeah, sorry about that.
At this point in time, I'm calling the meeting to order and we will proceed with the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla,
Here.
Councilmember Lesser,
Here.
Commissioner Mays.
Here.
All are present.
Right. Thank you. Before we proceed into the non-action items, I did want for those who have been that have not been aware of what this task force is doing. In the JEDO meeting of December, there was a request brought forth that we could consider potential support for small businesses in our community that were falling through the cracks because of federal support and state support. At this point in time, we had a meeting in February 5th, in which several notices were discussed. Part of that included Glenda Washington from the Greater Topeka Partnership giving a review of how many dollars are flowing into small businesses currently. To date, we have $4.5 million that have been brought into our community, both from city, county, and other programs that are available that are not including any federal response dollars. In addition to that, the other things that were discussed was ensuring that we talked about the parameters of what a small business was. And it was determined that small businesses were going to be defined by this group as businesses with less than 50 individuals. We also talked about micro businesses, talked about mom and pop shops, and we talked about which type of businesses were going to be considered for this assistantship. And there was conversation about maybe $1,000 up to $25,000 or even $10,000 from the amount of the funds that a business can apply for. There was also a lot of conversation with regards to the new COVID response stimulus that the federal government is in the process of passing that will also provide additional support to businesses, in which Mr. Lesser also included that there were an expansion of organizations such as childcare providers and other individuals that would automatically receive help that were not receiving help that would be excluded from this program. So at this point in time, we have in front of us a sheet that was provided to us with regards to the parameters of the relief grant. We are now formally in the non-action items, and I would invite conversation first and foremost from the commissioner and Councilman Lesser to see if there's new reflections that he would like to discuss. Either of them would like to discuss, and also, of course, to Ms. Glenda Washington and Ms. Molly Howie, also noting that we have with us Corey Wright. So the floor is open for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you did a good job of summing up our meeting from last time. You know, one thing that makes this difficult as we do this is the ever-changing I shouldn't say minefield, but field of stimulus packages and so forth. And just as recently as yesterday or Monday, there was a change to include sole proprietors that had been left out in the past. And so, you know, since the last time we did meet, where we did have conversations about whether we were going to include or exclude sole proprietors and the different things that came along with that, Monday it was the package was changed by the president to one-person operations like sole proprietorships and independent contractors have been very unsuccessful in the past and getting as little as $1. Previously, their loans were based on the profit they reported on their taxes that disqualified unprofitable business. That restriction has now been lifted. And now loans for sole proprietors will be based instead on gross income, a figure that excludes many expenses that will allow unprofitable businesses to qualify and allow many applicants to collect most larger loans. So now the problem with that is the SBA is not retroactively going back on that. So if they had applied, monies were dispersed or not, or a smaller amount, then they cannot let those individuals reapply. So I think possibly that's an area that we maybe focus on when we look at our different parameters. But I wanted to bring that to the committee's attention that happened just as recently as Monday. And so it changes a little bit of the conversation we had last week in regards to parameters.
Commissioner Mays?
Well, in addition to that, I just got a notification on my phone that the governor has announced that they are going to forgive the higher loans that were given out to the restaurant and hospitality industry. So that's another $5 million statewide that was initially sent out in the form of a loan that's now a grant. And so it does seem like there is assistance starting to really come in at a pretty good clip from the federal and state governments. I still think that there's going to be some folks falling through the cracks that we need to make sure we're there to catch. So I don't know. I think it's important that we get this program up and running sometime soon, so that we can at least find out who's interested and how many businesses we might be looking at based on the parameters that we set.
From the minutes that I read, there was not an amount allocated in specific numbers of the total amount of dollars that Commissioner Mays, that you were hoping for as part of this program. Is it $100,000? I mean, what are you thinking?
Well, so at JEDO meeting, we had allocated or earmarked $700,000.
700, okay.
And I think those were all out of the carryover funds from last year.
Ms. Washington, are there any remarks that you would like to provide? Anything that you know that is coming down the pike that we may be missing?
Not at this moment. I've been looking around. I'm just waiting for the president to say what he's going to do, and I think we'll know from that point.
Okay.
So one thing that in your recap that I caught that wasn't entirely accurate, we had initially talked about grants starting at $1,000. The discussion that at our last meeting, I think we came to a consensus that 3,000 would be the minimum. And so I would say that we would want to update that number. So we had initially decided 3,000 up to 25,000 would be the max. So a couple of questions that I felt still remained from the previous meeting, which I had a conversation with Glenda, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago, where we had talked about how would we determine the amount of grants and who selects who receives the grants. And Glenda, did you want to speak to that a little bit about the small business incentive committee that you've got in place?
We currently have a small business incentive committee, and they review the grants that we have under that program, and we would go through that same process. But with this being sort of such a big range, anywhere from $3,500 all the way up to $100,000, we've really got to look at $20,000. We really got to look at how we determine, or what is the calculation? How do we figure out who gets what? I know that when Molly and her team do incentives, they have a formula that they use to give those incentives. Should we then design a formula for these individuals to give them the same kind of preferences. So.
And Glenda, I agree with you. One of the things that we have done in the city is make sure that we standardize the questionnaire so that it's fair, that everybody understands where they fell through the cracks. So that if they have to reapply at some other point, they understand what those parameters are, and those are equitable for everybody. The other thing that I don't see here, but I kind of do, is that in the application process, it was one of the things that they have to disclose is disclosure of other grants or PPP loans received. And I think that before anybody is considered for these funds, they must demonstrate that they don't qualify either for any of the other assistantship programs that are available in the community. And I think that this is where a partnership with the Greater Topeka Partnership, or figuring out who the right partner is for these businesses, to help them find which would be the best qualifying support system for them. Because we have to understand that even though these are carryover dollars, these are also the dollars that we utilize for incentivizing other businesses in our community by business extension and other things, so that at the same time that we're using these funds to, of course, safeguard the businesses, the small businesses in our community who we love because they're our neighbor, but also making sure that those businesses that are looking for expansion, that are still doing well, that are here locally in our community, also have our support. So it's a really interesting balance that we have to strike. So one of the things that I would like to see in that application process that would be quantified is figuring out, since they are going to be going through the partnership, potentially through that committee being empowered of understanding what are the grant applications that are available, so that we can route these individuals to those two. Other comments or questions? Because if there's no more discussion at this point, we have in front of us the considerations for the grant parameters. And I think that we're at the point in time that if we are going to come up with some parameters, this is the place for us to start discussing them.
And well, I have one more statement. One thing
Yes.
you have to consider is that the grants that they may have received, probably only $1,200 or $1,500 or $1,000 grants, those didn't make a tremendous impact on their business. And so we don't want to exclude them because they received $1,500 toward their business. We need to actually look a little bit deeper and analyze it a little closer in order to make sure that we make the right decision for the small business out there.
Absolutely.
Would it be fair to come up with some kind of a formula as the amount of the grants that you received and purport as a percentage of your gross revenues or something to that effect? I mean, it's obviously going to be different for every business, what's substantial and what's not. But I think, I'm just trying to think of a way that we could do that, because you're right. I know that there are businesses out there, small businesses, that receive PPP grants in the amount of $1. And, we don't want to exclude anybody because of that, because they might as well have been denied. So, it's certainly something we need to look at, but, what's $1,000 may not be much for some businesses. That might pay the electric bill for a couple of months for someone else. So,
we have to
I don't know,
also,
just something.
well, Commissioner Mays, we also talked about making sure that we focus heavily on minority businesses. So we've got to figure out where they fit into that equation when we're doing the formula, because theirs is not going to be anywhere near as strong probably as the other businesses. So
Absolutely. I think that Commissioner Mays, the easy way to do this is that we should establish a rule of the parameters of how many months or the year prior that they had in their P&L. And then compare that to the year that they're having now, that they're asking for, the period that they're asking support from, understanding that they're going to show us what the gap is. And to that gap that they're providing, then they would subtract whatever amount of funds they have received of support. And then we are able to then cover that delta.
And that will work for businesses that do have year over year. We did talk before about allowing startups who have been opened in the year in a post-COVID world. And so I think that that's something that we may need to have some gray areas on, because I just don't know how you define that.
Well,
in
and
a
then for the
meaningful way.
startups, what you can do is, in order for you to have a startup, you typically have to, create a pro forma of how you're going to feel like your business is going to do. And rather than using historical data, we could use the projected data that they had
From their initial
as a
business
basis.
plan. Yeah.
Correct.
I would not agree with that.
Yes, sir.
I would not agree with using the pro forma as a basis.
Could you elaborate a little bit?
I mean, just because I have a pro forma does not give me a validation that pro forma is worth the paper it's written on. I mean, I see pro formas come in my office all the day, and I tell them to go back to work for who they're working for and not go start their own business, to be quite honest with you. So, I mean, I think a pro forma can be a tool, but I don't use, I would support using a financial statement or a tax return, and I think in those situations, I think that we deduct, if there's a loss, I mean, it's kind of got to go both ways. Is if someone's showing a loss that, they're not able to use depreciation, they're not able to use amortization, they're not able to use those things as showing the basis for their loss. And at the same point in time, I think we could have some businesses that have received some funds. If we are going to allow any businesses that have received any funds, I would think that you remove the income they received from those stimulus funds as true income in regards to, their bottom line, because it's not a real earned revenue. It's a forgivable loan, basically what it is. So this isn't going to be popular to say, but I don't know, with two things coming out in the last 2 days, that I'm that comfortable with moving forward where we're at right now without some more evaluation of what these new I mean, one of them just came out while we're meeting, and my phone's beeping, that council, or that Commissioner Mays did. And the point of this is the point of this was to come out to assist businesses that have been left out of the initial rounds of the PPP. But at the same time, this is taxpayer money that we're using that we still have a responsibility to make sure that it's being used for the best purposes that's available out there. And I'm not super comfortable without even reading what the governor just released and knowing exactly what's exciting to me is, what I read is, okay, the barbershops, these one person sole proprietorships and stuff like that, they're getting included in here right now. What I don't like about it that looks like maybe somebody who falls through is that person that came through and, as Commissioner May said, got $1, but they can't go back and apply for. So there's somebody that's missing, but we focus this, boom, when we first said, and we looked at, okay, what are the things that we're targeting? And the first thing that we said we're targeting is food and beverage. And the release that just came out from the governor is Kansas hospitality businesses are getting a financial break, at, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there's the top of what we were looking at, so this target keeps moving, but I still feel a responsibility of not just saying we got $700,000, let's go spend it.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable doing that.
Okay, Ms. Washington?
A couple of things. One was, toward the end of the program last year, a lot of people were pushing back on us using their tax return. Didn't want to submit their tax returns, but felt that the information that they provided us was sufficient. That's one thing. And then not everybody was able to get the loan from the state. So the money that was issued by the state, it went to a lot of people, but a lot of people in our community did not get it. They didn't receive any of those funds. So that leaves them out of that loop as well. So.
What does that have to do with, I don't understand what that has to do with what I just said.
Well, you said the governor was putting out a note that they were forgiving the loans that they had issued to individuals. And so I'm telling you, those individuals were not a lot of our people here in our community.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
five-
not what I
5
said.
million
That's not what I
students.
said because I haven't even read it yet, so I don't know what it
Oh,
is.
okay. All right.
Have you
Well,
read it?
Order.
I have not either.
So just so that we're not talking amongst each other, if somebody could just raise your finger, that way we don't have the back and forth. And Commissioner Mays, I know that you were going to say something, and then I'll go back to Councilman Lesser.
Yeah, the program that was about, the governor, it was a loan program available to restaurant and hospitality industry. Is called the HIRE program.
Mhm.
It was a grant program, or actually it was a loan program for $5 million statewide. And so, statewide, $5 million probably not sufficient when you're looking at communities much larger than ours. And then the announcement today was that rather than it being loans, they've turned it into grants. So they're not going to have to pay back that money. And those businesses who have paid back the money will get a refund. So that was the announcement. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. It'll make a difference, I'm sure. But, I agree, though. We don't want to just, this money is not burning a hole in our pocket. I get that. It is something I think we probably need to spend some of it to help some folks out. I don't want to just, cancel this whole program because there's other money coming in. I think that we have a responsibility to, ensure that we have a healthy business climate, as healthy as it was pre-COVID, if we can help it. And I think with the help from the feds and the state and the city, I think we can do that.
So going back to the document that we have with regards to the relief grant, we have a mission statement and we have still the question of who's it for? There were some targeted places that were listed here. And we have already agreed that startups would be included. How long must they have been in business in order for them to qualify?
I think anyone,
1 year?
I don't even think no, because I mean, I think they should have had to have been in business for a little while, because we don't want people starting up a business just for this whole, because there's free money available, right? So, but I mean, if you opened a business in May of last year, I mean, you should be eligible. I don't know.
Yes, Ms. Washington.
We've had, last year, we had about 17 businesses that came through our office that were brand new businesses. And those businesses weren't eligible for any of the federal funds. They were new businesses, and so they could not participate. You got a couple out there right now that are saying, we need help. We're drowning. Who's gonna help us? I can tell you that Milk and Honey is one of them. And she's drowning, and we need to be able to help her.
Tender Loving Care Pet is another one.
Loving Care is
Service
one.
out. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So, but we still have to come up with a parameter of startups, because if we don't put a date, a minimum date of operation, at least 6 months, then like Commissioner May said, anybody that started a business this week because they heard that there's going to be some support could apply for the grants rather than going through the proper channel of going through the partnership and working with you or with Katrin, city manager.
What I was thinking related to that was maybe we established that they just get the minimum grant. So say we know that they're that case and they can't prove their losses, that maybe they only qualify for the $3,000 level. That, you know, that way we're helping, we help them, we want them to stay, but based on them not having had any experience and knowing their losses or profits from the previous year, we would just simply give them a small help in the $3,000 grant because you can't prove anything else. And if we, know they are still in business after 6 months or whatever from when they started, just as an idea.
Thank you, city manager. That was my only concern with that is $3,000 would only cover utilities for somebody. And most of the challenges for these small business owners is staff and their location,
Right.
either the mortgage or the rent.
No, I understand that. And it's just the idea that that at least we would give them something that maybe then they pack that, with something that's coming new, that maybe from the next package, that our grant would get them to when they could get that next package availability, and maybe they're qualifying for the next federal aid package.
Can we just say the business had to have been operational prior to the end of 2020? I mean, I think we didn't really come out with this program until around the first of the year.
So third
and even
quarter
talk about it.
2020, because if we say third quarter 2020, you have 3 months
Yeah, you do have
of
9 months.
financials.
Yeah, I think that's plenty.
Okay. There's a lot of businesses that have been listed here. However, there's businesses that have been left out, like pet services. I know that TLC has been super active talking to the community about their needs. It doesn't seem like they're included here. It's got food trucks, retail. So what is going to be the parameter that we consider a small business, understanding that it's under 50 full-time? And then now the federal government will have support for sole proprietors. So understanding those two things, who are the groups that we're going to focus on if we're going to put this out to the community?
Well, we had talked about, just because we say that they're targeted industries, it does not exclude other industries necessarily. That, this is kind of where we see the most need. But TLC, I think, would probably qualify under the lodging portion of this as well. They're lodging animals and not humans, but they're still lodging. So I think that they would qualify under that. But what I don't want to do is tailor this for specific businesses.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's unfair to the other businesses out there. And so I put this in just kind of as a guideline, but not necessarily as a limitation, if that makes any sense. So,
Councilman Lesser?
Yeah, I think from the last time we talked, I don't think that I think everybody's, I think theoretically we could say everybody, as far as the type of business they're in, is eligible. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I don't know about you, Aaron, but I know we put that down to have conversations. That was the initial deal of target. Here's where we make sure these are the people hurt, and I think is kind of what you were doing. But it wasn't an inclusive list of saying this is all. I don't think anybody's off. Is that was my intention. I don't know that anybody's ruled out to apply for it based on what they do.
Okay.
Would you agree, Aaron?
yeah, and I think that it kind of goes down to where in the application process portion, I had written basically that they need to describe the hardship that they've had, and justify why they need a loan or grant. I mean, so I think that, because, and one of the conversations we had last time is because this is a local program, I feel like the folks that are going to be deciding this are probably going to have a good idea about most of these businesses and whether or not they have a legitimate claim to funds. And I think, because these businesses are in our community and we're not a huge community, that we can probably dig a little deeper and know, does this company really, have they been negatively affected by COVID and not been maybe not made whole, but at least made back some of their losses from other programs. So I think that, it's going to be a judgment call, I think, in some of these cases where we look at it, and just because somebody doesn't fit the narrow parameters that we've had doesn't mean that there isn't a need. I think that's where we've run into the federal government letting people down, is that they have those parameters, and if you're outside of those parameters, you're out of luck. And so we don't want that to come into play. I think that with the committee looking at these, that they're not just going to toss something to the side because they don't fit in the box.
And not only that, I think that the best thing that we've done is limit it to under 50 full-time employees.
Mhm.
And that's really going to minimize the amount of people that can actually apply for the grant. It's really going to help the smaller business in our community.
Right.
So at this point in time, it seems like all the questions and the who's it for has been answered. It seems like sole proprietors for now may not be under this, because we may have some support from the federal government that is going to be coming to sole proprietors. Is that the consensus of this team?
I think you have to be a little bit careful on what's the definition, I mean, of a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor, you can still be a sole proprietor, not a corporation, not an LLC, et cetera, and have employees. Not, if we're talking about a sole proprietor as necessarily as being the one person sole proprietor, the beauty, the barber, or the beautician, that's a one person, that's a different scenario than, the sole proprietor who decided not to incorporate or et cetera, but has, issues 10 W-2s every year to employees, or, 10 1099s to people that he used. I mean, those are different scenarios. So I think we have to distinguish a little bit, between those. I don't know if we use that as a number of, sole proprietors who have issued W-2s, are eligible.
1099s.
Or 1099s, are eligible, and the ones that have not, the true one person deals. But I don't know that if we're saying, I mean, I'm not proposing that we eliminate that, barber, that, pet, whatever it is. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying sole proprietor is not just necessarily a one person shop.
I think that, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that we talked about the fact that there were barbers and there were beauticians and there were those individuals that were employers or that work as hard as, and they should be given them opportunity. I think Sylvia Ortiz, Councilwoman Ortiz, mentioned that in her comments at one of our meetings as well, to make sure that we considered those individuals.
Okay, so then I guess sole proprietors are back in, especially if they're small businesses. So the recipient.
I think, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I would say, sole proprietors that were from a sole proprietorship, my advice would be sole proprietors that were in business as of January 1st of 2020. would be where I would put as a requirement of a sole proprietor.
Okay, that gives us, Commissioner Mace, are you amicable to that?
Sure.
Okay, so recipients receive, it shows that we have discussed $3,000 to $25,000. What is the consensus of the group?
I'm fine with it.
Councilman Lesser?
I'm fine with it. I would be fine with 5 to 50 too. I mean, I want to be able to help where we can make the most impact, you know, with these businesses. And so, you know, the top numbers where I start, you know, the 3 is fine because if you start where you want to start, you know, the 25, you know, I'm open for conversation of that. I'm fine with, if we want to be at 25, I'd hate to have it at 25. And we have this business that does have 10 employees that did miss out on this and this. And you know, I think I'm curious to what Commissioner Mays thinks, but, you know, I'm flexible on that. I think what comes down to what makes this successful or not successful will be when we get to the point of how we evaluate what the award is and what the basis is for evaluation. So, but I'm
The one thing that I will remind the body is that if we have $50,000 awards, more than likely we could only help 14 businesses in our community.
Right.
Whereas if we have $25,000 grants, that amplifies that number and we could help up to 50 businesses in our community. So and I think that we, in our heart, we understand that our capacity is limited. I would be more amicable to move 5 to 25,000, because I think that $3,000 is really not going to make much of an impact, even if you're a sole proprietor. So I agree that the minimum base may be $5,000, but my concern is that a $50,000 would really, we're going to have everybody trying to apply for the $50,000, and we're going to end up being in a really difficult position when we only help 14 businesses in our community.
Well, I don't agree. My position was that we could, not that we would help 14 businesses at 50,000, and that, I mean, if we use, you know, kind of the example Glenda said, I don't know what it is, and this, I'm gonna throw this out there and probably get a bunch of emails, but I don't know what a barber charges, you know, to go to, if you have a sole proprietor barber who has been in business and they rent their booth. I know that's kind of how that goes. And I'm just thinking, if they pay $250 a month times 12 to rent their booth, that's $3,000. And that, yeah, that does make a difference to them, because that's paid their overhead, which is probably their most expensive overhead is the rental of that booth. So now, where I see that as wasteful, if that individual has stayed pretty busy, we're helping them with $3,000, and then we set it up at 5,000. You know, does that mean that we're awarding 5,000 to somebody who really 3,000 is truly what their loss is? Where at the same point on the other end of it is, there again, we have that company that has 20 employees that, you know, do the same type of math on their rent and their exposure, and $25,000 is only going to pay half of their rent for that. So there may be only one company that gets 50,000. I don't know that, but that's just a flexibility issue. I'll concede to what, you know, Commissioner Mays, and you decide on that. I'm fine. I'm just pointing out what.
Well, I don't know how many cosmetologists and barbers there are in Shawnee County, but if we're giving $5,000 to each one of them, we don't have any money for anything else. There's a lot of people out there that are doing hair, and I mean, just one shop could have 10 people working in there. I mean, I think we're gonna run out of money pretty quick if we get $5,000 to every, because I guarantee you the first one we give, they're gonna go out and tell everybody else in their salon and every other salon in town, we're gonna get applications from every single one of them. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. They deserve help as much as the next business, but um, we've got only a finite amount of money.
So Commissioner Mays, so you would prefer the $3,000 to $25,000 benchmark? That was
Yeah.
initially, okay. Councilman Lesser, would you be amicable to that?
Yeah,
The 25?
if I'm fine with that, if that's the consensus of you two, I'll go with that. I just, like I said, that was my only concern.
Okay, and then there was a portion here that's about business continuity education. Ms. Washington, is there any idea of who would provide this? Would the partnership be providing that support, or how would that happen? Because I know that your staff is finite and there's only so many people that can support, but just trying to figure out how that would occur.
So we had volunteers do the initial, and so what we would do is I have the volunteers do the training, and then we hired somebody to help us with making sure that the actual package was in place. So there would be a sort of a consultant that would help us put that package, and the volunteers would help with the training.
Okay. So I think that question is solved. The partnership will have volunteers that will support this initiative.
Is that a requirement? Is that a requirement? Is that what, I'm a little bit lost there.
It's as part of the grant proposal. One of the things that was offered to the individuals that apply for the grant and receive the grant is additional support, not only to give them educational resources so that they can continue surviving, but also to try to help route them into different grant opportunities that could also support them to continue their business. So the question was who would do that and how would that happen? And apparently the partnership has volunteers that could support that. We have determined the amount. So the other question is who will administer and deliver the program? It sounds like if the partnership has worked on this, the partnership would be the place. Is that correct?
I think that's where that small business incentive committee comes into play.
You okay with that, Councilman Lesser?
I don't know. My concern in situations like this is because we have $700,000, that does not mean I'm saying that we need to go spend $700,000. There again, Aaron, give me some feedback on that. You understand what I'm saying right there?
Well, sure, but I think what the question that was posed was really, who decides what grants get awarded, and I think, for me, I think it's probably not wise for the three of us to sit down and go through all the applications. I think we need to be insulated from it a little bit. So I think that we have a commission already set up, that a committee that already does this type of thing, not exactly this, but similar. And so I think that that's probably a good place to put it if they're willing to do it.
And who's on that?
Ms. Washington, who's on that committee?
That committee has an individual from US Bank, Core First, individual from KTWU, and let's see, and then a retired business owner. So it's like 4 or 5 people. And the two individuals from the banks are vice presidents. So, deal with commercial lending.
Madam Mayor, I've got a lot of background noise, but it's quiet for the moment, so I'd like to chime in with a suggestion. We could chunk it up like we did with host, if the group would feel better about that. Commissioner Mays, could you convey what I sent you?
Yes, so I got in the chat box here from Molly, it says we can chunk it up like we did with the host program and do it in portions and then report the metrics of the applicants for each to pace ourselves and receive approval from this body before releasing each next round. So I think if rather than throwing $700,000 out there, I think if I'm not mistaken, Molly, what you're saying is maybe put out 250,000 in the first round, see what kind of response we get. We approve those as they get approved by the small business incentive committee. They'll present their recommendations to us. We would approve that and then perhaps go through a second round if we feel that there's a need to do so.
And what I like about that, Commissioner Mays, is the fact that we could say that the first portion of this is going to be only $250,000. And then at that point in time, we reevaluate from that point on. So let's say that we will, for the next 3 months, allow for $250,000 to be our pool. And then we come back as a committee next month and evaluate what new federal and state government programs are available to see then how we continue focusing down on the people that need the support.
Right.
How do you feel
about that? And I just got another text from Molly that said, that is exactly what she meant.
Yes,
So we got it right.
Great minds, great minds. The other thing that Ms. Wright wanted for us to remember is for us to think through if landlords are available to participate in this because of the losses they may be having through COVID.
There is a landlord program out there.
Okay, wonderful.
So I don't think they should.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
And
So we have our parameter. We have a potential Councilman Lesser. Yes, Ms. Wright.
I just would like to add, you might want to make sure that that's well written. I know that we've received numerous requests from landlords and it's rather frustrating for them to apply and then get denied. So you might want to make sure that that's clear when you push it out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, what is the landlord program that's out there right now?
Well, the landlords that requested money through our program were requesting money for mortgage assistance essentially. But the reality is there's tenant assistance out there right now where their rent would be paid if the tenant was going to, go to these places where we have some assistance for the tenant. So it's not eligible in HUD world regardless, but I just wanted to let you know that you will probably get requests for that if you don't outline it clearly.
Yeah,
I did see as well that didn't they also, as part of this recent release, extend the non-evictions to September? Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah.
I'm not for certain. Yeah.
The Kansas Housing Authority, I think it is, and they have several $1 million to assist landlords and tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time and I don't want to keep belaboring this. It seems like we understand who will provide the education, which will be the volunteers at the partnership. We know who can apply for the grants, and we also know the amounts of the grants. The final portion is the application proposal. And Commissioner May's proposal is that the businesses will submit the amount requested. Basically, we have already stated that businesses that are startups must have had their businesses as of the beginning of third quarter last year, and sole proprietors must have been in operation since January 1st of 2020. In addition to that, they will describe what the funds will be used for. They will provide some sort of income statement and provide the gap. That gap will also have to be disclosed considering the amount that they have received from additional assistantship. They will provide documentation of hardship. That all is documented here. There was the question, is everybody okay with that type of
I'm sorry.
application? Because I think that for the next meeting, what I'm proposing for this group is that if everybody is okay with that type of application, I know that Ms. Wright has extensive experience in developing grant scoring charts, and that we then, with these parameters, allow Ms. Washington and Ms. Wright to maybe work together if Ms. Washington would like the support, to develop their score chart that will be brought back to us with the sample application, so that then our community and us can look at that and then vet it, because it seems like we have everything everything that would be needed for a program to be in place. How does the committee feel about that proposal for our next meeting?
I think it's great if Corey and Glenda are willing to do
Yeah.
that. I mean, I don't want to,
Mhm.
put a burden on them if they're not willing to do it. So they're nodding their heads, so I'll take that as an okay. But one of the things that was one of the questions that Glenda had written on here was how often can the business apply for the grant? I'm thinking it's a one-time deal.
One-time deal.
Okay. And then also, are there things that they can or cannot use the funds for? I think we should really focus more on the cannot. I mean, are there things that we want to make sure that they are not using these funds for?
Commissioner Mays, I think that to simplify it is, as long as it's for operational expenses and staff salary, that is not covered under any program, staff preservation, those are two pretty open things. And anything that falls outside of the parameter of being able to retain staff and retain operations, then wouldn't qualify. Those are two pretty simple, straightforward. So that means that somebody can apply for their assistantship for, support with what Councilman Lesser was saying, like if they have a chair that they have to pay a rent for, that they could apply to supplement whatever staffing expenses they may have, insurance, things that would help their business continue. Anything that has to do with that is a qualifying expense. I think that if we start trying to narrow down, other expenses, like, say, okay, you cannot apply for anything that's travel related. You cannot apply for additional education. You cannot apply. We're going to find ourselves trying to find a whole bunch of exclusions, rather than saying it's specifically to help support you retain staff and business specific, business continuity expenses, operational expenses. Councilman
so-
Lesser?
Yeah, a couple questions, just for clarity. Did we, what was decided in regards to, were these individuals eligible, these businesses eligible if they had priorly received a PPP loan, or did we determine whether that was a parameter or not?
We determined that what they would do is that as they are expressing their hardship, they will disclose the amount of PPP or any other support that they have received. And that would be subtracted from their need.
Okay. Part of that, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm on board with this. I do want a few things that I would want to point out, that I would like to have as part, of the app, included in the application process, is a copy of their 2019 and their 2020 tax returns, and a profit and loss and a balance sheet statement as of 12/31/20, and then one
Year to date.
as of the date of their application, or the date of the application being due.
Okay.
And without getting too far in the weeds there, again, kind of like I talked about, I don't want to hold, and I assume, you know, Corey and your team will, I don't want depreciation, amortization, those type of things that count against them as you know, as the process goes. And I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily know that I would want, you know, stimulus funds that they'd received or stuff they'd received to count against them as well. I would want to be able to look at the financial statements and the tax returns in totality. I think the 19 and the 20 tax returns are going to, you know, when you break those down, are going to show you, you know, for existing businesses, going to give you a pretty good idea of hardship when you compare it to the statements.
Yes, Ms. Wright.
I just wanted, I'm just going off of our very new experience we're having over here at the city with our program. And one of the things that's pretty difficult is the newer businesses that don't have a history, and you can't really see a loss. We have to be able to see that for HUD over here, but don't know. You might want to consider a plan for how to handle those newer businesses that you guys are trying to capture for the loss.
And that's why we requested that those businesses provide their statements from, that's why we needed them to have their businesses either started for sole proprietors from January 1st of 2020, and then for startups to be startups that started up prior to first quarter of last year. So they should have at least some sort of statements to show us what they had been able to do, and what their gaps are with their budget.
And I think another way that we could look at, another way that we could look at that is have, you know, for there may be that like you're kind of talking about, Corey, that group, small group that, you know, we can have, you know, it may just be the internal financials, but it could also be, you know, their 1041s or their, you know, their estimated quarterly, you know, they're should be filing their estimated quarterly tax, which will give an idea of what income wise. That makes sense?
Ms. Washington.
So I do know, given our experience as well, Corey, we're going to run into a lot of those unsophisticated businesses that won't have this in place already. And so we need to be able to figure out how we're going to handle those individuals.
And I think, yes, Councilman Lesser.
Won't have what in place?
Financials. You'd be surprised.
I'm sorry?
I said, you'd be surprised that a lot of these businesses won't have financials in place. I mean,
Are we talking new businesses or existing?
all of the above.
Well, they better have tax returns.
Well, and I think that rather than using here this time for us to start outlining the specifics of the application, this is where we could allow a few weeks to Ms. Washington and Ms. Wright to start conferring after hearing our conversation with regards to how that application is going to look based on all of these comments that we've had today. The nice thing is the meeting is up in Facebook and it'll be up on Channel 4. Therefore, if they have any questions, in addition, Trey has been taking minutes to provide to the group so that as they are able to start outlining what that application looks like, it also helps them outline the scoring chart and the documentation that will be required for these two types of businesses and what the criteria will be. How do you all feel about that? Understanding that the first batch of dollars that would be released would only be $250,000. And even at the point of us meeting again if there is any changes in programs, we can incorporate that into our parameters.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
fine with that.
I'm fine with that if I think I understand, what you're saying. I think
So-
I'm fine with that if I think I understand what you're saying. And I know that we have to I understand what you're saying. We have to make these exceptions, and I want to be able to make sure, obviously the unsophisticated or uninformed or whatever, the terminology that was used is, businesses that may be surprised, but if you don't have a tax return, I'm not interested in this process being available, to be quite honest with you.
Well, why don't we, I think that this is for businesses that are starting that may need some support. And I think that this is where the group of volunteers could maybe be guidance to these individuals to start figuring out what their expenses are. There are going to be businesses that may not have a tax report because they're too new to not have them. So those are also going to be cases that we're going to evaluate. So I think that for us to allow the team that is going to help us write the application based on the parameters that we have outlined today, these will be good questions for us to address because I'm certain that there's other communities that are doing this, and it is always great to do some R&D, which is some rip off and duplication of what other communities are doing already. So I'm happy to try to do a call out to other mayors to see how they are handling some of this and bring some information back later on. But I think that for us to sit here and try to write that application without having gone through it and starting to create that frameworks for us to look at, it's going to be difficult for us to continue a conversation.
No, I understand that, but I don't think we should lose sight of the point of this program was to help establish businesses in the community with employees who are suffering, from the effects of COVID in their business. It's not a startup and an incubator for businesses that just decided to start up during, the pandemic, and certainly not businesses that have been in existence for some time that don't file a tax return. So, we're going to be putting a lot of work on a committee and on an application process that there again is to keep businesses going and not necessarily to become an incubator for and that's I want to help everyone. I understand that. Too many times we spend our time though in life helping the people that helping where if we would spend that time on I'm trying to think how I phrase this, properly, but I go back to what I had said earlier in previous meetings is I want to make sure that we are putting the most funding and the most effort towards keeping, sustainable businesses sustainable. And unfortunately, not every business is sustainable, whether it's COVID or not. I'll just say that. Fair enough.
Okay, fair enough. Do you ladies feel like this is clear as mud for you to proceed?
You know it.
Ms.
Yeah,
Washington?
it's as clear as mud. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as a summary, before we wrap up our meeting, there is no action taken. I do see that we do have the approval of the minutes and the schedule. But before that, I want to make sure that we do a small recap. What has been determined today is that we do have parameters on how many grants are going to be offered. There is going to be rounds of this. The first round will be $250,000 that will be available to businesses of less than 50 individuals. There is no specific group that we're targeting. However, there are going to be some requests that are going to be whittled down in an application that is going to be worked upon by Ms. Washington and Ms. Wright. This application will also be including a scorecard that will allow for everybody in the community to understand what people will be graded on. There's going to be focus on minority businesses as well to ensure that people are able to apply from all walks of life. And for the next meeting, what we will have is the evaluation of that application document. The agenda will include not only the evaluation of the application, it will include an evaluation of the scorecard. And in addition to that, it will include further discussion on any new programs that have come up since our last meeting. Is everybody okay with the direction in which we're headed?
Yeah, I think so. How long are we looking at waiting until we have our next meeting? I feel like that's been something that we've kind of had troubles with.
So I would propose giving the ladies at least a month for them to be able to work on those documents. I understand that Ms. Washington is working arduously right now with other programs, and Ms. Wright is also working with the programs that we have in the city for the rent and mortgage support that we're having, as well as the other water utility support programs that we have. Do you both feel that 1 month from now is fair?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Lesser, Commissioner Mays, are you amicable with that?
They know better than I do how much time it's going to take them to get that done. So I'll let them answer that question. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So,
Just let us know how things are going. and we'll
absolutely.
see.
So at this point in time, if we can take a look at probably March, a month from now, March 23rd is on another Tuesday.
Do we know when the next JEDO meeting is, the full JEDO meeting is scheduled? I'd love to have this done well in advance to that so that we have something to present.
May 12th.
May 12th, okay. So we
So
should
we
have
will
plenty of time.
definitely have something to
Yeah.
present. I think that based on our speed, we not only may have the application complete, but we may have a report of who has received the grant.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay,
Or
So-
Molly, do we have to go back before JEDO to finalize the funding, or are we good to go ahead and award these grants?
I believe the motion was to allocate up to $700,000 for this. So I
Okay.
don't think we need to go back to jail unless someone thinks
Okay.
otherwise.
I just wanted to double check, make sure we weren't running afoul of anything, so.
okay. So tentatively, the week of March 23rd. And what we'll do is that we will have my office reach out to the members of the committee to schedule that date, of course, including Ms. Wright and Ms. Washington, as well as the team that's present today, to be present in the meeting, including Chairman Padilla, to have the final evaluation of those documents. And if there's no other discussion on this item, we will move on to the action items. We have two very short action items. And the first one being the approval of the February 5th meetings. Do we have a motion for approval of the meetings minutes?
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have approval of the minutes. And the next thing was approval of the task force meeting schedule. I think that we are determining that the next meeting will be slated for the week of May 23rd. Do we have approval for that? I mean, March 23rd, pardon me.
March. Is that what it was,
we-
March 23rd?
Do we have a second for the week of March 23rd? for
Yeah,
us?
second.
Okay, being a motion and a second, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there public comment today? There is no public comment in today's meeting. Is there any other closing remarks that either Ms. Wright or Ms. Washington would like to present to the team? Okay, any other closing comments from the commissioner and the councilman?
Nothing from me. Thanks for helping us out today, Mayor.
Of
Glad
course,
you're back and going.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
good to be back, my friends. It's really good to be back. Well, that all being said, pardon us for the 13-minute delay. We had robust conversation. These minutes will be made public to the community as soon as they're completed. And of course, we will be meeting back again in a month. Thank you very much to the committee for your time. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.